A pleasure to meet all at last, and we're back at it once again with video games that are totally awesome. And for this instance, I'd like to follow up with something that actually was quite a big release. And I don't just mean any release. This kind of release actually spanned out on way more consoles than you could possibly imagine. Basically, by the year 2015, there was a point where a number of people had already moved on to the likes of PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. There was also the talks about the supposed Nintendo Switch, which came around 2 years later. But before then, there were still a good amount of people that not only were still on PS3 and Xbox 360, but also some other consoles out there, like the Nintendo DS and the Wii U. But the thing is that Snoopy's Grand Adventure, a title in which that supposedly meant to be more of an advertisement to the upcoming Peanuts film, which came out in late 2015. It was made possible thanks to the likes of Blue Sky Animations, which we'll never forget. Not just for this, but for many other films as well. The thing is, though, is that Peanuts 2015 was certainly quite the film to be put together. It was certainly a great way for old school Peanut fans to come around after many, many years and watch a brand new hit feature that came around just in time for Thanksgiving and beyond. But what I will say is that Snoopy's Grand Adventure wasn't exactly something like I would have possibly pictured. Even though the front cover of the game literally does show good old Snoopy inside of his supposed Red Baron, which was basically that unique dream sequence that came along, in which that Snoopy posed as a World War I flying ace, going up against the almighty Red Baron. Yeah, basically every time Snoopy sat down on top of his doghouse, it was his favorite fantasy to put together, in which that he would pretend like he's flying a fighter plane, going up against the Red Baron. And while his friend Woodstock, basically a chirping yellow bird, would follow him around on his many adventures, and Snoopy, of course, would remain the one thing that we recognize, man's best friend to Charlie Brown himself. And that's basically just how it sets ourselves up for something like this. But the plot line of Snoopy's Grand Adventure doesn't exactly follow along anything that you might expect. Instead, it doesn't really follow anything like how the movie played out or otherwise. It just sort of invents its own plot line. It acts more like an ad for the movie, coming out on every possible console they could put out. Xbox 360 and 1, PS4 and 3, Nintendo DS, and the Wii U, amongst many other things. Even PC. But Snoopy's Grand Adventure is, believe it or not, a side-scroller and platformer. But it does technically have its own unique charm, having more of the 3D-esque vibe, which it does sort of give us the unique feeling of it being 3D. The main collectibles are jelly beans that Snoopy picks up along the way, and he also occasionally finds lost Beagle Scouts. But that's just more of the tip of the iceberg here, because we do go through several different worlds in order to rescue several different friends, including Lucy, Linus, Pig Patch, Peppermint Patty, as well as a few others here and there. But basically speaking, Charlie Brown intends to have all of his friends together for a party, and it's up to Snoopy to go rescue these friends of his. It sure is actually a pretty unique story that would accompany any potential Charlie Brown episode here. The idea of traveling to different dimensions, to different worlds, in order to collect a bunch of jelly beans for the party, as well as lost Beagle Scouts, before coming across friends whom are taken into captivity by certain boss characters. While I will say that Snoopy's Grand Adventure is not exactly something I would wholly recommend to everybody out there, because not only is the game a bit on the monotonous and repetitive side for it being a little more than just a combination of side-scrolling and platforming and the occasional flying levels where Snoopy is in his makeshift fighter plane going up against the Red Baron, the idea of collecting a bunch of jelly beans in order to make the levels as worthwhile as possible, to getting a perfect score, getting a hold of many other items along the way, and the occasional usage of some special powers, including detective vision. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. If Batman did detective vision for one thing, then we have Snoopy's Grand Adventure, which came out a few months after Batman Arkham Knight, nonetheless. So, but that's just one power that you can put into effect. And you might remember when I talked a bit about some other game that involved a dog-like character going through side-scrolling and platforming capabilities, obtaining certain powers, and collecting a large amount of a certain item. Bones. I'm talking about Dogman Mission Impossible. Yeah. Snoopy's Grand Adventure, though, of course, came out 9 years before. So, we could think of Dogman as being like an ad for the 2025 Dogman film, while Snoopy's Grand Adventure acted a lot more like an ad to Charlie Brown's 2015 Peanuts film. So, that's basically just what I'd have to say on that part. On the flip side, though, with this having more 3D feels to it rather than the unique 2D comic book feel that Dogman put together, I guess one could say that much like the movie itself, the game actually did give out a unique feeling. So maybe that's one thing that they got right in this instance, but still, the somewhat redundant feeling of utilizing a side-scrolling platformer game in the year 2015, and again, it's not necessarily a genre that's easy to dissuade, because side-scrolling platformer games were so big 40 years ago. I mean, this is something that we've seen on Atari, Nintendo with Sega, and the fact that we can still get a hold of games like those on modern consoles like PlayStation and Xbox really shows that such things probably aren't meant to die off so easily. But still, I'm more than rooted to the fact that PlayStation and Xbox games, considering the best hardware capabilities, graphical enhancements, resolution, and hertz ratios that we can possibly achieve, it seems more appropriate that large open spaces, large complicated amount of things, high gigabyte file sizes, long downloads, long tedious walking around in large open spaces, occasional discoveries of certain locations, and tons of other unique stuff. That seems to be the best way to incorporate PlayStation 5 and Xbox Scarlet related games. And considering the more recent material that we have gotten, I'd say that it's more fitting for modern consoles to utilize the best of modern gameplay, while classic gaming, we could just leave to the older consoles. But considering the fact that about 10 years have passed since Snoopy's Grand Adventure had come and gone, the rarity of this game alone is sure to be quite something to put together. Yeah, this game didn't exactly turn out very well, most likely because of its redundancy. It's basically on the same level of fate as what we saw with Ninja Turtles, Out of the Shadows, Mutants in Manhattan, as well as Transformers Rise of the Darkspark. A lot of games seem to have gotten pretty high on the rarity scale, thereby making them valuable collector's items. And I will say, having had certain experiences with Transformers Rise of the Darkspark, I might have to talk about that at some point, because like Snoopy's Grand Adventure, Rise of the Darkspark had its own share on the high rarity scale because of the fact that it also had flopped for a number of reasons of its own. So, in terms of Snoopy's Grand Adventure, based on my overall ranking of this title, its side-scrolling platforming action in the year 2015, pretty good for what it is, but not great enough to the point where it's certainly worth a full gameplay. But I still did persevere to the point where I basically got treated to little more than just the characters dancing to the tune of the famous Charlie Brown theme song. The original, that is. They didn't use any of the songs from the 2015 film, but that's probably for the best. A lot of people wouldn't have wanted copyrighted stuff to go on YouTube anyways, unless it were from the original film's soundtrack. But other than that though, I could probably only guarantee it maybe a 7.4 out of 10.1 at best. Any higher than that would have probably been into more or less a different sort of territory. But if you wanted me to talk about Dogman Mission Impossible, which was much more recent in comparison, I actually already made a video of that. And you can check that out in GWK The First Impressions. If you know where to find it, that's great and all. Anyways though, later I'll have more video games that are totally awesome related content. And I'll see you guys in the next installment, soon to come.